Coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Coaches. I am your host, as always, guys, Coach Steve. We are back talking week 16 semifinals of your fantasy football season. Hopefully you survived the round one, or if you had a bye week, you were sitting pretty, but hopefully you survived with us, and we are moving on to week 2. Again, there's a game tonight. Hopefully you don't have to worry about it. You can just watch the game for fun. But I know myself, I have a couple of things going on. So does Coach John. So hopefully you guys win. And we're going to talk waivers tonight, and we're going to talk trust-o-meter. Waivers, at this point, there's a couple players here and there we're going to talk about. But if you don't have the players on your team at this point, you kind of know what's going on. But we're going to talk about some players that whether or not should we trust them over the next 2 weeks, because it's going to be pretty important for the finals and for the semifinals this week. So, of course, Coach Sean, what's going on, brother? Welcome in.
Oh, nothing much. I limped into the playoffs in a few leagues. I'm limping into the next round, so I'm doing all right. I'm counting my lucky stars that we're still surviving and we're still thriving. So hopefully all the listeners out there are in the same boat as me, or in a better boat. Hopefully they're dominating every week and they're a shoe-in. But either way, we're getting wins bit by bit, trying to get to that championship.
Yes, absolutely. So like I said, we're going to be talking some waivers tonight. We're going to be talking about some other fun things. But first, let's get into some news. Again, there's not too much we're going to go over per se, but these are some of the bigger injuries from week 15. Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, injured heel, did not really play in the game. I think he played in the very first quarter and then never showed up again and didn't even have a target. This one sucks. Keontae Mitchell, I'm pretty sure someone torn ACL or something like that.
Yep. Torn ACL.
The video was very terrifying to watch, very scary. But unfortunately, the young rookie is out for the season. Jamar Chase is dealing with a shoulder injury. Jaden Reed from the Packers is dealing with a toe injury. He scored a touchdown this past week here. Zach Wilson got a concussion. Trevor Siemian had to finish the game, or pretty much play the most of the game for him. Sam Howell was benched in week 15. Hate to see that for Jacoby Brissett, who played pretty well for fantasy. I think Will Levis also got banged up. Zach Moss also got banged up on Saturday, but he's pushing to play this week here. So there's a couple injuries that we need to keep our eyes on. But again, Thursday show is when we really get into the nitty gritty when it comes to injuries. But had to highlight this section for the viewers from the weekend. So
yeah.
All right, so let's get into some waiver talk here. So figured if you want to hear waiver advice, listen in now. If you want to hear about some other stuff, tune in about 25 minutes. So waiver wild talk right now. Let's talk about it here. So Baker Mayfield probably isn't. I think he's over 60% still. I forgot to take him off that list. But for the most part, there aren't many quarterbacks that you want to be playing that are in that 60-40. Maybe Matthew Stafford is in that range now because he had a good matchup this week. But for the most part, if you don't have your starting quarterback, they're probably below the 40% mark. Dynasty, there's some dynasty quarterbacks rolling around. Drew Lock tonight potentially. Mason Rudolph is starting for week 16 for the Steelers on the day before Christmas Eve. Tyler Heineke might be starting this week as the Falcons don't know who they want to start at quarterback. Case Keenum might get another start. CJ Stroud is still in the concussion protocol as of today, so he might get another start. Ryan Tannehill could be out there. He could be playing this week here. I know Marcus Mariota could play tonight, but he likely won't play next week. I don't think Hurts sickness is long-term thing, but if you're looking for a player tonight, you might have Marcus Mariota starting at quarterback. But the 40% range here, we have Jake Browning, Joe Flacco, Nate Mullins, Derek Carr, Tommy DeVito, Gardner Minshew, and then Will Levis, Ryan Tannehill. John, who do you like out of this bunch that you're willing to trust if you're still streaming quarterbacks going into the semifinals?
So really the three, I'll say, Jake Browning for sure. I think at this point, the weapons are there. No Jamar Chase sucks. But T Higgins had an absolutely ridiculous touchdown. He had a great game. They can move the ball on the ground with Chase Brown and Joe Mixon. I think Jake Browning can do enough to be serviceable in your lineup. Joe Flacco, another one, makes me a little bit more nervous. I think he is turnover prone, so it can absolutely happen. And then Gardner Minshew. I think Gardner Minshew is just kind of steady Eddie. Had a bad week last week, but overall he's going to be in that 14 to 18 point range. Doesn't really, we'll see what happens with the run game, whether we get Jonathan Taylor back, whether Zach Moss back. But he can still air it out, and so we'll see. I think those are the three that would be interesting to me. Tommy DeVito, I'm going to give a little nod just because I like the matchup against Philadelphia. I think he's going to have to throw to keep up in that game. But I don't know. I think you're really testing the waters if you're going down to like Nate Mullins and Levis and Tyler Heineke, all these other guys. So I guess I say all that just to say basically Jake Browning and Joe Flacco are fine. If you can't get either one of those guys and you're in the semifinals, then I don't know how you got here. Good luck. You're on mute.
Yeah, I mean, backup quarterbacks are the way of the world in 2023, so it's more than bound to happen. So, but yeah, I kind of agree. Jake Browning at this point is a definitely good streaming option against the Steelers this week here. They've been a mess in fantasy overall. He's proven enough that he can work even without Jamar Chase on the field. He has another great wide receiver in T. Higgins, so I'm pretty happy with Jake Browning and what he's able to give. Again, Joe Flacco, pretty good. Even had a good game this week despite turning the ball over like 3 times. Houston's a little bit easier of a matchup than the Bears were. So there should be some good value from him. Nate Mullins, honestly, he wasn't bad. I like Nate Mullins as an option. I started Nate Mullins in my first round of my playoffs last week, took a shot with that with the Cincinnati defense, and it worked out. Did not work off early on. I was a little nervous. But at the end of the game, he put up 21 fantasy points, and that's really all you can ask for when you're streaming quarterbacks. And he's got a great matchup against Detroit this week. Those top 3 guys are probably for me the most confident in options. Derek Carr is still shaky for me personally, even though I had a good game. Tommy DeVito, I don't know if I really want to trust him in the playoff matchup, even though it's a very favorable matchup. Minshew had a good week again, but again, they're on the road. They're in Atlanta. Atlanta's a little tougher in the secondary, and then I don't know if Tannehill starts, I might consider him a little bit, but Will Levis, he's just what he is right now. He's still a young player trying to develop, so. And Jalen Hurts will start tonight, so he will be active.
Oh, nice.
Good for him. All right, over to
yeah, great.
Yeah, well, good for you, especially.
Good.
For the waiver wire running backs, what we're looking at here in that 40 to 60% range, the one guy that really does stand is Tajay Spears. They might end up giving him the ball a little bit more. Derrick Henry, we saw, 20 carries for 10 yards, not really efficient there. They might end up using him a little bit more in the offense. For Dynasty, you still got guys like Isaiah Spiller. Honestly, at 16 carries on Thursday Night Football, and no one's really talked about that. Obviously, he was a top 3 prospect coming out just a couple years ago. So if he's on your waiver wires, you might want to go out there and just throw a little bit and see maybe next year he might end up having some work. Again, Trey Sherman might get a role in this offense. Tyler Goodson, both on the Colts, especially if no Jonathan Taylor still, and if Zach Moss can't play. Those guys, they had some decent production this past week, and Kevin Harris scored a touchdown for the Patriots. I don't know if that's something, but young player still, maybe they don't want to give Zeke all this work. I don't know. Maybe they're trying to find some players for next year. Who knows? But dynasty rosters, that's really what you're getting over there. In this 40% range, guys that are relatively available in most of your leagues, especially redraft, obviously. Zamir White, I don't think anyone really took him seriously. We don't know about Josh Jacobs' injury. Yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jerick McKinnon, Trey Sherman. Justice Hill comes back in the fold. Chase Brown, Isaiah Spiller, Roshan Johnson, and Kenneth Walker. So, John, name up a couple of guys here that you would look to target in this week.
Chase Brown is probably number 1 on my list. He is getting some receiving work. He's showing that he's pretty electric with that. he is getting enough work to at least give you a solid floor. I mean, he's had back-to-back weeks of 6+ carries. So I like Chase Brown. I think he's a good player, rookie. And then again, also, if you are you want to spin that dynasty narrative or keeper narrative, Joe Mixon is short money to cut next year. So we'll see what happens there. I think Chase Brown's legit. So he's going to find some usable time here. And then, obviously, if anything happened to Mixon in the next week or two, you got a bona fide superstar. I also love the Isaiah Spiller love. He got 16 carries. They just lost their offensive coordinator, their head coach, basically everybody. They're playing for next year. I don't think Austin Eckler is long for this roster. We could see Isaiah Spiller start to get more work, more carries. He was highly touted. He was a big draft, sort of draft day name at the running back room. So it's good to see him finally start to get some recognition. And then last would probably be Jerick McKinnon. They're saying Isaiah Pacheco could be back next week. That would totally put a kibosh into any of that. So if Isaiah Pacheco is still out, I'm very interested in Jerick McKinnon. If he's back, then forget everything that we say nice about him.
People are probably very mad about that touchdown pass that he threw.
Oh my God!
He threw in front of him over what Pat Mahomes could have done. So people are probably pretty mad about that. But yeah, I mean, Chase Brown stands out as a standalone value if you're looking for an RB2 that will have value moving forward. I think a lot of these guys are, situational based. He's carved off a role for himself. I wouldn't even be mad about Justice Hill seeing more work on the offense. He's kind of
what great one actually.
Deontay Mitchell was, but not as fast. He's kind of more that lightning to thunder of Gus Edwards. And then again, guys like Isaiah Spiller and Zamir White are definitely both really interesting, especially if Josh Jacobs is out one more week. As Zamir White gets to go against the Chiefs, terrible against the run right now. Recently, would be great to probably pick him up, but again, Josh Jacobs could very much be back. And then everyone else like Roschon, I don't really want to touch right now. Kenneth Gainwell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Again, he got that big catch and touch for a touchdown. I'm not buying that. McKinnon would be interesting if Pacheco was to miss, and I really do believe Zach Moss is going to try to play this week. So Trey Sherman is like, you can pick him up, but like I'm not really like going out of my way to get him. The Colts, I think, who do Colts play this week? The Falcons. They're very strong against the run, so I'm not really expecting much from him. So.
And there's rumors Jonathan Taylor could be back too. I mean, he could be an absolute. I mean, put in a $0 bid on him if you have the space, but he could be useless. He could be so useless to you. Yeah. So I would just be nervous.
I might not even waste time, but
yeah.
You're better off waiting and seeing. Let someone else pick him up. Why not? Let them deal with it if they want to. So
yeah.
All right, over to the wide receivers here. Dynasty wide receivers really didn't find anyone that really stuck out at this moment. I mean, Malik Heath, I think his name is, from the Packers. I mean, he's seen some opportunity there for Dynasty. I mean, there's really no one else that I really like. I'll trust going into the following week. For that 60-40% range, Tyler Boyd could be interesting with Jamar Chase potentially out. Noah Brown obviously stepped up in a big way this past week here, and he'll have CJ Stroud back, which will even boost him up more. And again, Curtis Samuel continues to be the bright spot in that Washington passing game. So, he definitely needs to be rostered and potentially flexed in. Again, this might not be the best week for it, but it could be valuable for, I got to find out who they play in week 6-17. Who do the Commanders play in week 17? San Fran. They are vulnerable to wide receivers, so he might have some value in 17 more than 16. So let's talk about some of the 40% range here. So the guys under that 40% range, the high-end guys right now that you could go out and grab that are valuable are Joshua Palmer, Rashad Rashid, Jameson Williams, Devontae Wilkes, Demario Douglas, Zay Jones, Demarcus Robinson, Darius Slay, and Wan'Dale Robinson. So, John, who of this grouping here do you care to talk about, or you like to pick up if you had to?
So, the two that I would really be interested in would be Dontavian Wicks, who, the Packers wide receiver core just seems to be beat up right now. Dontavian Wicks, solid player. They seem to hit on a lot of their rookie picks this year. I mean, Tucker Kraft looked good. I mean, everyone that they seem to put out there seems to produce. If if we're definitely not going to have Christian Watson. If we don't have Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks kind of defaults into the number 2 wide receiver, probably number 3 option in this offense. I don't mind it. I think he's, not as sort of versatile and electric as Jaden Reed, but still a good wide receiver. Good a chance as anybody at a touchdown. And then Zay Jones, just because he's seeing, saw crazy volume the other week without Christian Kirk, and then, saw decent volume again this week. I think it's only going to be that steady, 8+ targets a week for Zay Jones. What he does with them, that's up to Zay Jones. We've known him not to be the most consistent player, but he can have big games. He can have a big week. I always joke around, but I won a championship with Brashad Perryman one year, and you just need a guy who can blow up for 1 week for you, and Zay Jones is that guy. So, Zay Jones could have 15 targets, catch 10 of them, and be over 100 yards, and you're psyched about it. So I think those are 2 plays that I'm comfortable with. The other guys, super dart throws, a little bit riskier, not as high of a ceiling, but those 2 guys I'm comfortable with.
I like it. Before I go to mine, we do have a question in the chat. Hey, guys, need your opinion. I'm leading by 42.98 points, and my opponent has Lockett and DK. Could I win my first playoff game?
Yeah, I think
yes, I think so.
I think so. Lockett and DK would have to combine for 43 points.
Yes,
I mean it's
at 22 and 21 points combined.
It's close. It's close. I think the one thing you have going for you is it's Lockett and DK, so both can't score. You know what I'm saying? Like if one scores, drives over, next, no more points. So it could happen. You're hoping that
Philly runs the ball.
Yeah. You're hoping they control the clock. You're hoping they control the clock. Philly runs the ball. Lockett would make me nervous. If Lockett hits on one of his big, which he hasn't done this year, so I'm not predicting it. But if Lockett hits on some 68-yard touchdown bomb, that's the one weird little X factor that could change it. I think DK is going to be around 16 to 18 points, maybe 20. It's a tough, bad in terms of you. It's a good matchup for wide receivers. So I think DK can really do some damage, but I'm not super scared of Lockett. I think you'll be okay. I think it's close. It'll be probably right around 35 points. It's going to make you sweat, but I think you'll be okay.
Yeah, you're definitely going to be sweating. It's not a sure thing that it's very possible that it could happen, but realistically, will it happen? Likely not. If you look at a matchup where the Commanders about a month ago, where the Seahawks played them, and they're terrible secondary. They give up tons of fantasy points to wide receivers. They did combine for 32 points. So that's getting close, so that's very possible that you win within 5 points. I think you can win. I don't know if both are going to go off with Drew Lockett quarterback per se. I think DK will have a good game. Lockett might have like what he had last week, 80 yards, 11 points. And if DK has under 25, you're set. So you're going to hope and pray, and we'll keep you in our prayers right now. So
for sure. That's a close one. I've seen some sweaty ones out there. That's right on the line of being the sweatiest.
Yeah, unfortunately. So some of the players I really do like is Wicks. It really depends if Christian Watson plays, though, obviously, and if Jaden Reed plays, he might not play. They're calling his injury potentially a turf toe, which could put him out for a few weeks. Wicks has been just dominant when he's gotten opportunity on the field, so he's definitely someone I'm willing to pick up this week. Zay Jones, he's got a great matchup coming up. I am a little concerned. I believe Trevor Lawrence did suffer concussion last night near the end of the game, so that's something we'll have to monitor this week here. Darius Slayton, honestly, I think he could end up being a guy that ends up being a sneaky win for you in Week 16. He plays the Eagles. They need something going on in that receiving group here, and Tommy DeVito has made them a little bit better. And in a really favorable matchup, he might go good. Joshua Palmer's fine. He does have a tough matchup, though. in these next few weeks here. I think he'll be a fine addition, but doesn't have an upside play. Like, yeah, he had a great game this past week here, but again, a lot of that was after being down 35 points. I mean,
right. It was one play. It was one play. If he didn't have that massive
70-yard touchdown,
72-yard touchdown, it's like, all right, he would have been single digits. And it's like, that sucks.
I mean, 3 for 34 yards, like that's what he could actually give you.
Yeah.
So that's what you have, and then Keenan Allen could be back too. So, but yeah, Wilkes, Douglas, Zay Jones, and Slayton are probably the top guys that I really want to target this week if you're still looking for players for week 16. And then last but not least, the tight ends. Again, there's really no one in that 60-40 range. In terms of dynasty, there's really no one there that I feel comfortable going after right now. If anything, like Will Mallory from the Colts might be someone interesting. But again, he had no targets this past week, so I lost all faith in that potential this year or even going into next year right now. But the under 40% range guys, we have a question. Let me answer this question first before we get into the tight end. So, hey guys, I have Josh Allen, Mixon, Swift, Amron, Jetta, Waddle, and Njoku, and the Colts defense. I'm down 2 points. So Swift, that's all you're down is Swift right now. You're down 2 points with Swift left. Should win.
Yeah.
Swift can get the job done. He absolutely.
I would hope so at this point. DeAndre Swift needs one catch for 10 yards. It's a full PPR. You're good. You could be good.
Yes,
could be good.
You're fine, dude. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Your situation.
Dude, the panic. I get it. The panic is so real in the playoffs.
He's only scored 3 points in back-to-back games. So like, I'm sure he's like, well, he get me too. I don't know.
I know. Oh, that sucks. Yeah, it sucks. But I mean, I think you're in the clear. I think you're good. His matchup next week would be Ty Law, Bijan, James Cook, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, Ferguson, and Chris Godwin. Could I win against this team? Yeah. I mean, we'd have to really look at it and look at matchups and all that. But I mean, I'm not looking at what James Cook did as like the new norm. I think James Cook is still a between the 20s running back who is electric enough, can do big things. He's a big player, but he's going to have spike weeks and down weeks. CD scares the crap out of me because he could put up 40 points every week if he wanted to.
Not against the
Dolphins. And then Bijan, I mean, he just had negative. He just had negative points. Like, I get he's another one that, like, yeah, because he's hyper talented, he could have a 100-yard, 2-touchdown game, but he could also do what he just did and be terrible because the Falcons are idiots. So I feel I would be scared on at paper, especially after what some of these players did this past week. But I don't think this team is by any stretch of the imagination unbeatable.
Yeah, I think your team winning. He said he also have JT on my bench. So next week, who do I bench? Put in JT.
Probably Swift. Probably Swift. Yeah. Swift to get JT back in there. Like, hey, Swift, thanks for getting me into the semis. See you later. Here's
Swift
the bench.
Plays well this week. I would rather keep Swift in the game because he plays the Giants.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh. I mean, Joe Mixon, last time he played Pittsburgh, he put up 7 points altogether. So I don't know if I would even want to put JT back in, unless we know he was 100%. Like, he's got a tough matchup. It would be more of a coin flip between him and Joe Mixon this week, personally. That's the way I see it. I would want to go back and forth. If he plays it like practices in full all week, I'll feel more confident playing JT. But if he doesn't, I'd probably just stick with Joe Mixon right now.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get over to the tight ends list here for the waiver wire this week. Hunter Henry, Gerald Everett, Tucker Kraft, Tanner Hudson, Juwan Johnson, and Cade Otton. So, John, of this list here, any one or two that you really prefer to go after if you had to?
Tucker Kraft, we talked about him quick. He's the other rookie tight end for Green Bay Packers. I think, their wide receiver core is pretty depleted. They need pass catchers, and he looks good. And then obviously, not obviously, but quick shout out to Hunter Henry, who started off the season great, took a 6-week 7-week hiatus, and then lately has been back to being pretty good. So I think you can play Hunter Henry with some confidence and Tucker Kraft as well.
I like it. Yeah, Tucker Kraft. He's got a tough matchup, but the 49ers just allowed Trey McBride like 90 yards on 10 catches. So I think he might not do that, but he should end up being pretty solid. Hunter Henry definitely scares me just because it's hard to trust the Patriots offense.
Oh, it's so hard.
You know, the matchup is fantastic this week. It is hard to trust them. Jawan Johnson also has a pretty good matchup this week too. I believe they play. Who does the Saints play this week? It's a good matchup. I think it's the Rams. Rams are terrible against tight ends this year. So, and Tanner Hudson, if you're really looking for just a stability, he's someone who can get you 6 or 7 points in a game. Might not be more than that, but pretty solid floor he offers every week. So, and Jared Everett, he's okay. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So those are the tight ends. That's the waiver wire talk. I said 25 minutes. We'll be done with waiver wire.
Nailed it.
So let me bring up my final slide of the night. We're going to talk about trust levels. Oh, thank you guys.
Boy.
Yes. Hold on. Thank you guys so much. My first year playing fantasy this year. My high school friends added me to this league just to milk $20 out of me. I watch football, but I don't know what was fantasy. Yeah. Well, hey, man.
I love it, man. I love it. This is why you're here. You're learning. And listen, they didn't just milk $20 out of you. You're about to win this thing, and you're going to get money from them. So don't worry about it. You're in good shape, man. Welcome to this addiction of fantasy football. It is a lot of fun.
Yes, and if you want to play Dynasty one day, just hit up our chat, and I'll get you into a Dynasty.
Yeah, just let us get in the Discord. Yeah, we'll really hook the line into you. Yep.
Yes. I have like 35 leagues, my friend. So yeah, you're good there. All right, let's get over trust levels. I picked players out of this past week who might have performed well or did not perform well. And should we trust them over the final 2 weeks of the season? We're going to go through each one. We're going to make it somewhat quick, and we're going to give us a level 1 to 10 in terms of trust level with these players over the next. And again, we have quarterbacks, tight ends, wide receivers, and running backs. So we'll start with the he said something else here. Until this year, I may get my ass and jump if I win this whole thing. I got to
win it, baby.
Yeah, you're winning. You're definitely winning. I love it. All right. Oh, you're subbing right now. We appreciate that.
Let's go. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So let's get into the quarterbacks first here. So we have Sam Howell, Tua Tagovailoa, Nate Mullins, and Kyler Murray. So starting with Sam Howell, again, we don't know if Sam Howell is playing in Week 16, but he's been a guy who's been a top 10 quarterback in terms of fantasy all season here. Where's your trust level with Sam Howell right now, John?
It's funny because if you asked me this a week ago, I would have said my trust level is probably, 10 being the highest. My trust level is probably a 7 or an 8. I trust the guy. He seems to have his handle on the job, but I don't know. The weapons aren't awesome. The offense doesn't really move as well as I'd like it to. But he's still throwing the ball at a crazy rate and scoring fantasy points. So I would have said high, but I mean, now there's rumors of him not playing, and I don't know what happened, in the matter of a game, but it seems like the Commanders are kind of like, well, what do we have outside of Sam Howell? It's like, well, why are we testing this now? Why are we figuring this out now? Like, I don't know. It's just weird. So my trust level dropped. It slid a little bit. I do think you can still play Sam Howell. I don't think that they just bench him. It would be crazy to me to bench him. But, crazier things have happened in the NFL. But if he's playing and he's starting, my trust level is probably down even at like a 5. He's like, you can start him. He'll get you points. I don't think he does enough to win you any weeks, but he also won't really lose you many weeks either. He'll be in that high teens sort of fantasy range, which is high teens in terms of points, 16, 17, 18.
Right.
Points, totally fine. You can do that and then win in other ways. But yeah, I think the stench coming out of Washington lately is concerning. It's weird. It's weird that all of a sudden Sam Howell now is talked about, getting benched for Jacoby Brissett.
Right. Yeah. No. So right now, where I have him over the next few weeks now, based on what happened this week here, I would assume that I think they should go back to him. I don't know why they wouldn't. my trust level is down to a 4 right now for fantasy. He's been under 20 fantasy points over the last 4 weeks now. He's not playing with that same upside that we've been seeing, that we saw in the first half of the season. So, with the benching, the lack of confidence potentially from the coaching staff now, if he continues to play bad, if he gets a job back, the potential for him to be benched might be more there now. So I'm down to like a 3 or 4 right now with Howell.
And I'm gonna I just looked. He has the Jets next week, which we know is a tough matchup.
Yeah,
then has San Francisco, then has Dallas.
Yeah.
I'm down to a 4. I'm now down below 5. I'm at a 4 with you.
Right. All right, so we'll go over to Tua. Tua, obviously Tua is my boy. How do you feel about Tua over the next 2 weeks now?
I think Tua, his ceiling and upside really comes with Tyreek Hill. Like, he can have monster games if Tyreek Hill is there, and he can have okay games when he's gone. So that's the difference. Like, yeah, he'll be okay without Tyreek. He'll throw to Jalen Waddle. Mostert will rush some in, so you kind of lose some scoring upside there. But once you add Tyreek, like, any given week, he could throw for 304. So you got to take that for what it's worth. And so I think my trust level with Tua is, tied into Tyreek Hill, but I feel like Tyreek Hill is going to, he's chasing that 2,000. He really wants to play, almost played this week. So, I'd say he's probably close to like a 6, 7. I think Tua can have some big games. They're going to really throw the ball with Tyreek Hill back. So, the only concern is Mostert continues his touchdown fiasco and all the touchdowns go on the ground. But with Tyreek Hill in the lineup, I don't think that happens.
Yeah, so for me with Tua, I have him as a 6 right now in terms of trust level over the last 2 weeks of your fantasy playoffs right now. Sorry. He's got Tyreek Hill, absolutely. But we've seen him put up bad games with Tyreek Hill in the field. So for me, it's not really that he's too much tied to Tyreek Hill. Yes, the potential of him having more upside with Tyreek Hill is absolutely there. But with him having the ability of what he's been showing me over the last month now, it hasn't been as upside-like. And he's had Tyreek for 4 of the last 5 games. So for me, it's a 6 level. But next week, there's potential for a shootout with the Cowboys. The Ravens scare me. That's going to be big for the fantasy championship game. So for me, I'm down to a 6. I think there's an upside there, but I don't know. He's not a must-start quarterback, but he has upside, but his floor is kind of risky right now in fantasy. That's the way I see Tua, and unfortunately. So, all right, over to the next guy, Nate Mullins. Nate Mullins coming off a good game. He's going to be the starting quarterback next week here. If those who don't have an elite quarterback, how do you feel about Nate Mullins over the next 2 weeks now? Weapon.
Mullins is good. I think he's the best thing he has going for him is his matchups. He gets the Lions twice in this, and then Green Bay Packers once. Packers defense is good. Secondary's not insane, and Lions defense has been on an absolute tumble the second half of this season. So both beatable teams, and you get to play the Lions twice. So I like that. I don't love that Justin Jefferson's sort of banged up, but he can make it work. He's a gunslinger. Doesn't seem to really like most of these backup quarterbacks. He seems to not be scared to just fire it and let it go. So they will run the ball with Ty Chandler a lot. Ty Chandler looked really good, but I still think that if they want to keep pace with the Lions and the Packers, who can score points, they're going to need to throw. And Nick Mullins is serviceable enough to get you 20 points fantasy wise. He's not really going to do much on the ground for you, so you have to just kind of live and die with what he gets you through the air, and I think it's enough. Like I said, I like the matchups, so my trust level on him is probably somewhere between Sam Howell and Tua. I think I have more trust in Tua, but I don't, you know what I'm saying? So he's probably like I think I gave Tua a 7. So I'll give Nick Mullins a 5, and then Sam Howell's farting around at a 4.
Yeah, I think Nate Mullins at a 5 is a pretty fair comparison in terms of trust level. Like next week is a great matchup against Detroit. Like I might actually consider playing him against Detroit next week here. I like the matchup for them. The Packers, they showed a lot of weakness last week for the passing game there. They allowed Tampa Bay to kind of just stroll over them. But maybe Minnesota can do the same thing. Maybe they can find a way to do well against the Packers there. I mean, last time. I'm trying to look at when they played the last time. Kirk Cousins had 23 fantasy points. If Nate Mullins can put up 21 fantasy points, that's pretty good. And if he can do that over the next 2 games, you're sitting pretty happy at your quarterback spot. So maybe not a 5, but maybe I honestly put him in the same tier as Tua right now. I think there's some upside in Nate Mullins right now in his game. Again, he started off sloppy. I get it, but he's got the weapons. He's got Justin Jefferson. He's got Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. Like he's got all these weapons to throw to. He just needs to get them the ball. And if he can do that, he's going to get fantasy points at the end of the day. Again, not a household name. I get it, like Tua Tagovailoa, but Nate Mullins might help people win championships. So I have that 6th level, but again, his talent as himself, definitely question marks. All right, so let's go over the next quarterback here, Kyler Murray. How do you feel about Kyler Murray moving forward? He did lead the game for a little bit this past week, but he came back in. How do you feel about him over the next 2 weeks?
I don't trust him at all. I don't trust him at all for 2 reasons. One, what made Kyler so amazing for fantasy was his rushing and scrambling ability. We haven't really seen that since he's come back. Obviously he's coming back from a pretty catastrophic knee injury. I wasn't expecting to see it right away, but I was hoping to see it this, against Pittsburgh, then coming out of the bye week against San Francisco. At least show me some life. Show me that it could happen, and it hasn't. He's clearly not on the same page with his receivers. Other than Trey McBride, none of them seem to want to do much. So I get scared. Then you have the matchups. You have Chicago. Chicago's got a tough sort of front 7. So any sort of rushing upside that Kyler presents is probably gone in that matchup. Philly, same thing. Tough front 7. You can throw on them, so there is a way to beat them that way. But I don't trust the wide receiving core for Arizona right now. And then you're ending the season off with Seattle. Seattle's a kind of middling defense all around. So, but I think the next 2 weeks are going to be really hard for Kyler Murray. And this idea that he could get you 20 plus points, no problem, is probably gone at this point. He's coming off injury. We haven't really seen it. Sub 20 almost every week. So I'm low on Kyler Murray. I think you'd start him over, you probably start him over, Bailey Zappi and some of these crazy low-level guys. But, I would start Joe Flacco before starting Kyler Murray. I would start Jake Browning before starting Kyler Murray. So that tells you my trust level of Kyler right now. I think it's the lowest out of this group. I'll say that much as well, too. I would start Sam Howell over Kyler if Sam Howell's the starter.
I respect it. Yeah, so for me, Kyle Murray, I have him down as like a 4-2, honestly. What I'm seeing out of him, it's just not enough for me to really want to trust him over the next 2 weeks. He had those 2 good games in weeks 11 and 12, but from a standpoint for the entire season, coming off that game and a tough matchup, he still struggled a little bit here. The Bears are a really good matchup. Now, Eagles might be a good matchup in week 17, but I don't know if I will want to trust Kyler Murray in the last week of my fantasy playoff championship. He hasn't proven enough this year that, he's back. He's back to what he was a year ago. It's kind of hard to trust, and I don't want to trust him this coming week here. Bears are a really good team overall. I think he'll have issues on the road the next 2 weeks away from Arizona. There are going to be some weather situations maybe in Philly and Chicago. Yeah, I don't really want to trust Kyle Murray. I just don't think he's back, and his weapons are all hurt. He doesn't have great talent around him right now, outside of Trey McBride. All right, so let's go to the tight ends real quick here. Let's do the tight ends real quickly here. We have David Njoku, Darren Waller, Dalton Schultz, and Dallas Goedert. John, go through those guys real quick.
David Njoku, you have to trust. He's done nothing but perform for the past however many 6-7 weeks. So I'm trusting David Njoku. Darren Waller is an interesting one. I don't want to trust him. Because because again, the optics are you're not really playing for much. It's Tommy DeVito. It's, what are you really going to get? But they seem to be playing well around Tommy DeVito. The offense can move the ball. I don't think any of their wide receivers are supremely talented and need to be focal points of the offense, whereas Darren Waller is and can be a focal point offense. So I'm putting my trust level at Darren Waller probably a 6, probably a little bit above me, middle. Dalton Schultz, give me CJ Stroud and we can talk. And then Dallas Goedert, I think is the problem with Dallas Goedert is almost the same as like George Kittle. There's so many weapons on this offense and they can score so many different ways that you might just have a week where Dallas Goedert isn't needed. And then just as easily the next week, he could have 7 receptions for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it's just tough. I think that's just kind of par for the course with Dallas Goedert. You have to know that there's going to be down games. There's going to be lulls just because the offense is so good. They can win a myriad of other ways. But I'm still trusting him in terms of like I'd start him over a lot of other names. So my trust on him is probably closer to like a 4-5, mid-level. I'm not really going to go at the waiver wire. I'd probably start Dallas Goedert versus anybody that's on a waiver wire at this point. But yeah, I think Njoku, you have to trust. Darren Waller, you're kind of boxed into trusting. Schultz, I'm okay pivoting away as long as CJ Stroud's gone and Dallas Goedert is Dallas Goedert.
All right. Those are John's trust there. For me, in terms of these tight ends here, David Njoku for me right now is 10 out of 10. He's playing at a high level. Him and Joe Flacco seem to have a real strong connection in this offense. He's got the Texans and the Jets over the next 2 weeks here. 2 matchups where I'm pretty comfortable just throwing David Njoku out there and letting him do what he's able to do the best. He's playing at a high level. He's seeing red zone targets right now. I trust him 10 out of 10. He's starting rest of the season here. Darren Waller, I have him as a 7 right now. He came back first game. He had 4 catches for 40 yards. Like, okay, that's exactly what you were doing beforehand. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what a low-end tight end 1 does the rest of the season here. And he's got fantastic matchup against the Eagles and the Rams over the next 2 weeks here. Yeah, Darren Waller is going to be in lineups for me rest of the season. Again, there's some issues, obviously, with the question marks on the offense for the Giants. But Darren Waller, he seemed to already be going back as the top guy on this team for the pass catcher. So I have him around a 7 right now. Dalton Schultz surprised me this past week here. Case Keenum at quarterback. You have the Titans who are fantastic this season against tight ends. And he put up a real respectable game. I'm just trying to pull up his stats real quick. Again, he finished with 58 yards. I honestly didn't expect that out of him. I would expect like a 20-point game, a 25-yard game out of him. And he did well. Now, if Nico Collins continues to be out, I have Dalton Schultz around a 6.5. If he comes back, the matchups aren't that great. I probably have Schultz as more of a 5. But it really will depend for me personally. It depends if Nico Collins is playing or not. And then Dallas Goedert, he's only got 2 games over 10 fantasy points this year. I mean, it's not great. There's a lot of weapons, like you said, John. So like for me, I have Dallas Goedert as a 4 right now. And you're right. You're probably starting him over most of the waiver wire guys at this point, but like, you're not going to be comfortable starting him. If he gets you 6 points, you're going to be pretty happy, but I don't really see upside in Dallas Goedert right now. Again, I'd rather start all the other guys over him right now. So he's down to like a 4 for me. Yeah. All right. So let's get over to the running backs. Let's start with the top 3. Go quickly through the top 3. Zeke Elliott, Austin Eckler, and DeAndre Swift.
I have probably a level 8 trust in Ezekiel Elliott. He's going to get all the work. I feel confident in that. Kevin Harris getting a touchdown doesn't scare me away. I still think he's going to get 20-plus touches a week. Problem is you're on the Patriots, and they're not going to score a lot of points. So, you need to make a lot happen on your own to give you touchdown opportunities. I think Zeke can do it. So he's probably a low-end 1, high-end 2 rest of season for me. Austin Eckler, the opposite. I'm so scared of Austin Eckler. I don't want to start him. There's no world where I feel confident starting him. They just lost their head coach. They're clearly packing it up, looking at next year. He's a free agent at the end of this year. So there could be a real turn away from Austin Eckler. He hasn't looked great this season. And now his only saving grace was Brandon Staley, who's gone. So my trust level with Austin Eckler is, 2. I get you might have to start him, but there's I would start a ton of other names before I start Austin Eckler. And then DeAndre Swift, similar to kind of what I was saying about Dallas Goedert. Beginning of the year, he's looked and gotten similar amount of snap share and work since the beginning of the year to now. The only difference is he's not scoring touchdowns. And so if touchdowns sort of swing back his way, then he'll be fine and you're totally psyched. Otherwise, you probably have a, RB2, low end RB2. And that's what DeAndre Swift is. He's an RB2 with upside. So, with upside that they're not doing the tush push from the 4-yard line. That's the upside. The upside is they actually hand it off. And so my trust level with DeAndre Swift is probably a 5, 6. I like good running backs on good offenses, and that's what DeAndre Swift is. I think that's, I trust Zeke the most, Swift kind of in the middle, and then I don't trust Eckler at all. I don't trust him at all.
All right. So for me with Zeke Elliott, I'm at like a 6 with him, honestly. I mean, obviously we don't know if Ramondre Stevenson's coming back or not, but this offense still continues to show us that they don't put up a lot of points. And Zeke Elliott needs those targets. You saw this past week, he didn't really get much off his targets, and he's not running very well. So for me, that's also already concerned. But he does have a good matchup over the next 2 weeks. The Bills, the Broncos, there's some level of favorable matchups there for him. He just needs the targets. And if he gets the targets, he'll be fine. But right now, my level's around a 6 with him. Austin Eckler, they actually play the same opponents. They play the Broncos and the Bills. And he played the Broncos last time and did well. I do question whether the coaching changes make it so that they find a way to get Eckler back involved in how it used to be. Again, that might have been more of a Kellen Moore thing, so maybe it doesn't change as much. But your season's almost over. You want to just find a way to get points on the board. Well, how do you do that? You give the ball to your best players possible. So for the Chargers, it's just about putting on a show, I think, at this point. And you just got destroyed this past week here. So Eckler, for me, I'm still around a 5. I don't fully trust him. If I have a better matchup, I will probably put him on my bench. But if I don't, and if I'm picking up one of these waiver guys, I'd still probably rather start Eckler because I'm hoping that some upside is still there for him in this offense. And they find a way to get him back involved just to try to make some noise. I mean, he might be gone after the season, so use him as much as you can. So I'm around a 5 with him. DeAndre Swift, I'm still at a 7, and it might drop if he has a bad game tonight, but he's got the Giants and the Cardinals the last 2 weeks. Definitely good value there. And if they can get back to running the ball with him, it could be sky's the limit for him in the next 2 weeks of the playoffs. He could single-handedly win you a fantasy championship if he plays well tonight and over the next 2 weeks. So I'm about a 7, but again, he's been under 10 fantasy points in the last 3 games. The offense really isn't clicking right now. So that's why I have him as a 7. But if the offense was doing well and he was doing well, I'd probably put him at a 9. But maybe after tonight, I might feel differently and put him on an 8 or a 9 in fantasy. So, all right, next 3 running backs here real quick. John, Ty Chandler, Saquon Barkley, Dave Montgomery.
So Ty Chandler, anyone who's listened to the show for a little while knows how much I love Ty Chandler. He's great. If you liked Keaton Mitchell, you'll like Ty Chandler. They're very similar archetypes. They're crazy fast. They love to hit home runs. Ty Chandler has a little bit more in the passing game chops. So, and Coach O'Connell came out and said that, Ty Chandler is expected to be kind of their featured back for the rest of the season. Makes sense. I think he's great. I think he provides more of a spark to the offense, and has good matchups. We talked about it. He has Detroit, Green Bay, Detroit. So should be high scoring affairs, should be good matchups. I'm in on Ty Chandler. I think he's my confidence level's 7, 8. I think he's a very strong play going forward. Saquon Barkley is a volume play. He's very steady, very solid. I don't know what it is, but he doesn't seem to have that same sort of breakaway speed that he's had in the past. Maybe it's age, maybe it's injuries getting to him. But he is still getting, 25 touches, 25 opportunities a game. Those are hard to come by, especially at this point. So I think the ideas of Saquon Barkley having massive upside of, 150-yard days, that's probably gone. But he is still very solid and running on a decent offense. The Giants look competent with Tommy DeVito. And then David Montgomery. David Montgomery is, we knew this was going to kind of happen. The transition to Jahmyr Gibbs is real. I mean, you take a guy 12th overall for a reason. But I do think David Montgomery still has a home, still has a role. I just think that we're starting to see the touchdowns kind of drift away. Beginning of the year, he was scoring touchdowns at a crazy rate, multiple touchdown games, 4 out of, the first 6 weeks. So I think that a lot of where his fantasy production came. I'm still willing to start him. I think you certainly can, but it's not a must. It's not as strong of a must start as it was earlier in the year. So I would say confidence on Ty Chandler is probably a 7-8. Confidence on Saquon Barkley is probably 6-7, 6-5. And then David Montgomery is probably the same as Saquon Barkley, 6-5. I think they're both just good volume, heavy workload plays.
All right, I like it. So for quickly, Ty Chandler, again, I love the game that he had this past week here. We'll have to see if Madison ever comes back this coming week. If it does, I feel like maybe Chandler might have the starting job, but Madison will get his work in the offense as well. I don't know if Ty Chandler is going to run for 130 yards over each of the next 2 weeks here. Obviously, he's got a hard matchup against the Lions, a good matchup against the Packers. If he does get the start without Madison again, he's for me around a 7-6 for me personally. I'm not completely on board with his talent, but he showed enough this week that, he should be in that consideration of starting. Saquon Barkley, he's got tough matchups. He's got the Eagles and he's got the Rams the next 2 weeks here. If he's not going to see the target share that we're used to him seeing, then there's going to be an issue there. I mean, 2 targets this past week. You got to give this man 7 or 8 targets when he's not seeing that this season here. So for me, Saquon, the matchup's not great. He hasn't really been doing that well. Just 2 games over 10 fantasy points in the last 5 weeks. He's around a 5 for me too. Same with Austin Eckler. We know this is brand names, but they're not performing like brand names right now. And then Dave Montgomery's got 2 tough matchups as well. The matchups are not easy. Obviously, he's starting to lose some work to Jahmyr Gibbs, but he's still getting red zone looks, which we like. But he plays the Vikings and the Cowboys the next 2 weeks. So those are going to be tough matchups for him to really succeed here. But his involvement in the red zone is still there. I have him at around a 6.5 moving forward. So, all right, wide receiver talk here. Diggs, Brandon Ayuk, Brandon Cooks. John, go for it real quick.
Stephon Diggs scares the crap out of me, so I don't have much confidence in him. Something is clearly off right now in Buffalo. So I think you probably have to play him because I don't know what your options really are at this point. But I would be very nervous putting him in every week just because I just don't know if there's really a floor anymore. There used to be, you were guaranteed 8-9 receptions beginning of the year. Now that God knows if you can get that. So I am nervous about Stephon Diggs. Brandon Ayuk, I'm confident. I love Brandon Ayuk. I think his games, looked really good. 49ers are moving the ball really well. Similar to some other conversations we've had, it could just be, Brandon Ayuk could go 6 for 97 and no score. And, it doesn't feel good, because he gets dragged down at the 5 and they just punch it in with Christian McCaffrey. But I still think good receiver on a good offense, you gotta trust that, take advantage. He's healthy, looks healthy. So I'm fine with Brandon Ayuk, probably at like a 7-8. And then Brandon Cooks, the Cowboys have cooled off of late, so it's not a must start Brandon Cooks every week, but you can. He's the number 2 option, number 3, probably behind Jake Ferguson. But when that offense is cooking, when that offense looks right, he could be a 100-yard and a score kind of guy, and that's valuable.
All right, I like it. For me, Stephon Diggs right now, over the next 2 weeks, he's got the Chargers and he's got the Patriots again here. And for me, it's hard to trust him because he's been under 10 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks, coming off a bye week. He's actually been under 10 fantasy points in 4 of the last 5 games. And it's just not right. And a lot of clicking, and he's off at 5 targets past week. That's not good. You don't want him seeing low target shares. And if they're going to continue this running pound kind of game flow, that could be a concern giving Diggs those. He was averaging almost 10 targets a game in the first half of the season. Now he's averaging 6 games. He's averaging almost 7 targets a game, and it's dropping. It's dropping. We don't need that in fantasy right now. Diggs for me right now is a 5. I have a major issue with him. Like this week should be a comeback game for me. He's got the Chargers. It should be a game where he bounces back. If he doesn't, I don't think I want to even start him against the Patriots because I don't want to put that in my lineup once again. I don't want 6 points again in my lineup. I'll go some other route and find a matchup that I do like. Brandon Ayuk, he's in 9 for me. Herbie fine, bad week for him. He's got the Commanders in the championship round. If you can get past, this coming week with the Ravens, you have a player that should be in for a big game in week 17. Brandon Cooks, he's more of a 5. He's up and down. He's really matchup dependent. He's got the Dolphins this coming week here, and then after that he plays the Lions. 2 decently good matchups on and off, especially the Lions. Again, he's more of a 5 for me. I think he's more matchup based. He isn't someone I'm just throwing in there, and he's not someone that should just be an automatic start. So that's where I kind of see it with him. Yeah. And then last but not least, Terry McLaurin, T. Higgins, and Chris Godwin. Go through that real quick there, John.
Terry McLaurin, I don't trust at all. I think it's really hard to trust him, even though you want to. So he's probably a 3. T. Higgins, with the potential missing of Jamar Chase, I think his target share goes up. He looked really good this past week, had that crazy touchdown. He's probably at a 7, 8. And then Chris Godwin, if it wasn't for this past week, I would have said, no, my confidence is so low on this guy. But he had a good week, had over 100 yards. So I think Chris Godwin, the talent is still pretty talented, but my confidence is not great because they're not using him appropriately. So I would say probably a 5 on Chris Godwin as well. It seemed like Chris Godwin was absolutely dead, couldn't use him. But this past week at least gave you some life that if you were painted into a corner, you could start Chris Godwin and maybe something nice might happen. So that's better than it was. That's better than it was a week or 2 ago with Chris Godwin.
That's true. For me, Terry McLaurin, like I said, if he's attached to Sam Howell right now, I'm down to a 2 or 3 with him. He's got the Jets and he's got the 49ers the next 2 weeks. Again, 49ers aren't as bad, but Jets are a tough matchup. I really don't see Terry McLaurin going off. I know he did just with Jacoby Brissett. If it happens to be Jacoby Brissett as a starter, but still, I'm not really confident to want to put Terry McLaurin in my lineup. It would be more like a 3. T. Higgins, yeah, he's more of like a 7, 8 right now, especially if Jamar Chase misses. If Jamar Chase plays, he's more like a 6.5. But him being able to bounce back in a playoff game is huge for fantasy. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of people were mad because he was probably on a lot of benches this week here.
So many benches.
But he's got the Steelers and he's got the Chiefs the next 2 weeks, games where it might involve them throwing the ball a little bit more. So there might be some value there for him on that note. But if he's the main guy, 7, 8, he's got to be in your lineups no matter what. Again, Chris Godwin, he's got 23 targets over the last 2 weeks here. And this week he put up big numbers with those targets, 100 yards on 10 catches. And he's got the Jags and the Saints, 2 matchups where it might be favorable for him this year. But again, he's a 5 because if you had to get past him not playing well most of the season and to put him in your lineup. And I don't know if I can believe that he's going to do that. This coming week is a matchup where I might consider him as a flex. And if he doesn't do well this week, then he goes right back to me not trusting him for the championship game. So this would be the week to trust him. But again, I'm still like a 5, 6 with Chris Godwin moving forward. So, yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, that's going to wrap up our trust levels, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully that was cool. Something different that you guys could kind of get some value on some of your players. Probably not all of them, obviously, but some of them. Coach John, anything you want to say before we get going?
No, I want to wish everybody luck tonight. Hopefully you continue your dreams of fantasy championships through tomorrow. I'm in it with you guys. I'm in the thick. So I need AJ Brown to not be outscored by Jalen Hurts by 14 points. And I've progressed in four playoff spots. So I'm doing okay for myself. I'm proud. I'm proud of the teams I've assembled and sort of had to deal with. And so I ultimately, good luck, everybody. Playoffs are fun. Fantasy football is a rigorous game, and it comes down to sometimes a little bit of luck and a little bit of having the right pieces at the right time. But this has been a fun ride. So I'm glad everyone's tuning in, and please subscribe because I love doing this show with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Yeah, we appreciate you all who've tuned in tonight, whether you're listening on our YouTube channel at the Fantasy Coaches, or if you're listening over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. We do really much appreciate it. Obviously, we're just here to help you guys win championships. That's why we do this, guys. When I'm making big bucks off it, we're here to help you guys make money. We want you guys to let us know if you make money at the end of the day, like we're doing for our own league. So, as always, guys, we'll be back on Thursday to talk starting sits for week 16. We only have 2 more episodes left this year. We will probably have an episode next Monday because it's Christmas. So if you do celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. If not, Happy Holidays. And, we'll have another start and sit episode for the championship week. I might jump on Christmas morning and do a waiver show. But yeah, we're running out of episodes this year, guys. If you guys don't follow our show, we usually take the month of January off. We usually kind of, take a break, because we've been going nuts for fantasy football for almost 4 months, maybe even longer, obviously. But we usually take a nice break in January, and then we'll get back up, in February, right after the Super Bowl, and we'll start talking about next year. It's going to be great. So we thank you all for tuning in and listening. Good luck tonight if you're still playing for week 15. If not, we'll see you next week for week 16, guys. And you have a good one.
Back to back is not far-fetched. We got a couple of Clark Kents.